Thank you, Scott, and it's great to see so many familiar, well, not faces, but names in the chat. Hello, everybody. And I'd like to thank again Essentia Health, who is the sponsor of Love Letters, this December 5th concert and all the activities around it. And now it's my pleasure to welcome our guest for today's LAMFcast, mezzo-soprano and song specialist Clara Osowski. Among her many awards and accolades, she was the recipient of the 2018-19 McKnight Fellowship. She was the first American prize winner at the Das Lied competition in Heidelberg, Germany, and she is the Associate Artistic Director of the Song Source Festival. So welcome, Clara.
Oh, I did it right.
You did it right. You appeared just in time.
Most difficult thing at 10 a.m. Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I really appreciate you being here. So we are here to talk about the genre, the repertoire of art song. And I wanted to start by just asking about your personal connection to this repertoire. What's your history? How did you develop into specializing in this repertoire? What drew you to it? And what is your experience?
Sure. Well, like most people that were music oriented in high school, even the first art song I sang was in solo ensemble competition, and I think it was actually a duet arranged of Schubert's Trout, which now looking back on it was like, what were you thinking, and who played that? But that's how I was first introduced to it, and I think that's where a lot of us digest a lot of it first, is all that solo ensemble competition all over each state. But when I went to college at North Dakota State, go Bison, for my undergrad, opera was really foreign to me. I think I saw my first opera was La Boheme, was Fargo Moorhead Opera, when I was 18, maybe. So it was not my first love, but opera was a way to study. So I kept getting cast as Zita in Johnny Skiki, or mother in a mall, which I was not a mother at 19 years old, still not. And like, I was never in a desert my whole life. So I was like, what are all these characters and who am I and what's going on? So I think honestly, song was a way for me to introvertly study who I was and like allow it to make mistakes, not in a public setting. I really was drawn to song, I think, mostly because I learned a lot about the composers. I loved history. I actually studied microbiology for 2 years. So I decided to actually jump into music fully when I realized that there was so much history and theory, and I was exercising that part of my brain. But song really became my focus when I, read the Brahms biography that Jan Swafford wrote. And I realized that composers were living and breathing people, and they were just expressing themselves. They weren't trying to put on a giant show of, Florence in 17 whatever. And I don't know, I think maybe the closest opera character I felt was Ruth from Pirates of Penzance, but yet it still wasn't any of my internal feelings. Like I was always doing something for someone else. So when I went to grad school at the University of Iowa, my teacher, Stephen Swanson, kind of wrapped me into this song world and said, when you sing Strauss at 20, it's going to feel a lot different when you sing Strauss at 28. And he said, you're going to go through a lot. So he's like, why don't we start there and experience some of that stuff? And I think it was that. I think it was, the poetry. I also think there's a little germ of my dad saying to me, even though he's not a musician, he was a wrestler. And we grew up on a farm, so everything is a rural focus in my family. But he always said, with wrestling, you were only responsible for yourself on the mat. And I think with art song, it's a very similar thing. I'm only responsible for the piano. The piano. I gotta stay in time for him or her. but I there's just something about that. I'm not relying on costumes, and I'm not relying on an entire orchestra. It's just me and the pianist making that music. So I think that's it.
Very cool. Well, you said that the history of this repertoire is something that drew you to it. So I'm excited to get to share that with our audience today.
Yeah.
And I like to start these discussions sort of by defining terms. I think oftentimes we find out that these terms, something like art song, is a little bit trickier to pin down than you might think. So how do you define art song? How do we, what does it mean?
Yeah, I was thinking a lot about this the past couple of days. Song, we're so used to song being everywhere. Like it's one of the first things we learn, how we learn our ABCs, things like that. So song is in every single culture, just like laughter, just like dance. Like it exists in every culture. What I think art song is to me is that it is a sense of, just like something on a wall is art in a gallery. Your son or daughter could draw you some art, and that would also be useful. But that was, for them, that was an expression only for them, or a little bit of a gift, but it was only for them. I think art song in general is an expression to communicate for the masses, just like art is an expression in the gallery to communicate. It's tricky because I think art implies that a little bit of that there's more culture focus than entertainment focus. And it's tricky because I think a lot of entertainers are outwardly focused. They are everything, this is me, everything is, you might be like me, blah, blah, blah. But then there are a lot of entertainers that do draw us inward and say, this is who I am, do you recognize this? And it's like that type of communication, more listening based than showing based. So to me, that is where more art song stands, is when we're inwardly giving rather than outwardly saying, here I am, I'm coming to you. Yeah. So it's tricky because I think even some jazz artists have more art song in their canon than just plain old song, entertainment song, so pop song,
Absolutely, yeah. And I think sort of one technical definition that you can go with is the setting of a poem for a singer and an instrument, maybe a couple of instruments.
Right.
In which case, and in this sense, we're using the term art music as it relates to particularly Western European art music. Right. So this is a tradition that exists there all the way to the Renaissance, if you think of Renaissance songs, and continues through the Baroque period, and is very utilitarian in a way because it requires such small forces. Right. But I think for me, something that is key to it is that union between poetry and music, and the sort of the attempt, which you get particularly in the sort of flowering of art song that happens in the 1800s. It's all about how to set a text, how to convey the emotional qualities and content of poetry in music, and how to do that in sort of as small forces as possible.
Poetry is super important. And if you think about the earliest, it's probably some of the most amateur poets, or just just whoever's on the street that picks up a guitar and tries to serenade someone. That's exactly what it is. And it's the idea that I think poetry always came before song, and it developed and evolved before composers could even latch onto it. I think maybe it's that where when the Germans started collaborating together, when Schubert had all his friends write poetry and set them, even if the poems were not that great. It's that sense of, that's when people started to make more art. Like that was the more listening thing. That was the more collaborative sense of things. Like they weren't writing poetry. I think they weren't writing song just for themselves. I mean, they started in salons and things like that. So it ties in with that. Yeah. And now that we have Philip Glass and Steve Reich and stuff like that, I mean, text has gone in many different places. So it's kind of, I think starting with the text as the germ is what a lot of composers do. And I think that's probably what developed how song became in the concert hall.
Yeah, absolutely. And now we are getting a little bit into that history of this repertoire. in the way that it's most commonly thought of. When we think of art song, generally we think of the 19th century, of especially Schubert, but Schumann, Brahms, all of these people. Let's talk a little bit about how this sort of early lieder or song tradition develops.
Oh, yeah. Groups of friends,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like there's basically, I always think it was almost like a group therapy session, or like, like I went to my job and my full-time job and it was not great. So here are my feelings about it. Here are my feelings about night. And I think then composers just saw a way to express that for other people.
Mhm.
I think, I don't know, I can't imagine being in a house of 10 people and say, hey, here's this new thing I have. Let's play around with it a little bit. We do that a little bit already, like now, but it's not, it's so much easier now.
Yeah,
I,
absolutely.
I think partly was the development of the having people in a room together to talk about what they're experiencing. I think the Enlightenment really let people acknowledge that stuff, acknowledge that, oh, cause and effect is really there's something to my personality and how that changes along with all these outside factors. But it's also like the development of the piano, how everyone was able to access that instrument, and how important that became as a thing in your house. Everybody has a KitchenAid now. Back in the day, everybody had a piano. So
Right.
I think there's
Right.
a couple factors, yeah.
And I also tend to think of it in conjunction with the poetic movement of the time. This is the beginning of the art song tradition, is also sort of the beginning of what we think of as romanticism in poetry. So much of the content of these poems, where we're talking about nature and rustling brooks and chirping birds,
Yeah.
and all of this imagery is very musical and lends itself to being set to music, because you can
Right.
you can put that bird in the piano, and you
Yeah.
can put that rustling brook also in
Right.
the piano somewhere, or in the vocal line. And so I think it was also, in a way, just a really fortuitous coming together of this literary movement that was so focused on not only nature, but nature as a way of mirroring individual human emotions,
Yeah.
maybe even over the sense of form and structure that had governed earlier poetry.
Sure.
We start getting into these really individualistic statements of emotion that seem ripe for music. We're always, I feel like there's such a long history of, in composition, composers having to look for an excuse for why the people are singing, because it's not totally natural. You don't
Right.
just go into your friend's living room and say, I had a bad day.
Right.
But this natural imagery and these intense internal emotions almost give an excuse for why this has to be sung, why it can't just be spoken, because it has so much emotional content.
Right. And I don't know about you, but there are moments there, I go in swings of like 6 months at a time of like, I'm really into German romantic poetry. Like, give me all the Goethe I can handle, and that's great. And then I'll just completely take a 180 and go this like surrealist route, or like beat poets or something. And it goes in swings, and I'm so grateful we had that, and I think that's where things evolved, is that even these poets, these composers, they always had that, they had moods,
Mhm.
like seasonal moods. Like, it happens, or go through outside factors that you don't expect. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm really grateful that it develops, slow enough so that you can see how even in some of these composers' short lives in this, in the romantic era, you can see how they were approaching song as a way to be expressive and almost as an experimental playground for their larger works.
Absolutely.
I think it's nice to see. I think I even did a paper in grad school about some opera composers' overtures being experimentation, or keyboard sonatas for his overtures. And it's a really similar thing that I think Brahms's symphonies are better because he knows how something is sung. I mean, of course, the Requiem, but you can hear every orchestra or every instrument in the orchestra. They always want that sung line and that phrasing, and we have those composers to thank for it. I really
So I think, this early Romantic period is really when the genre starts to flower, especially in Germany, and there are many different reasons for that. So we've got the artistic movement of the poetry that's going on. We've got the technological advancement of the piano. We've got the economic reason of songs being a good way to make a living as a composer. I mean, it's not going to make you rich, but it is something, songs are something that you can sell, because now that these households have a piano, they want something to play. And maybe if only one person plays piano, but the other can sing, you can sell a lot of songs to people. And I particularly think of Schubert there again, who even in his very short life, and with all of the financial hardships he had, you get the sense that song was not only his economic stability, but also in a certain way his therapy, his way of getting out a lot of the pain that he had in his life, between his love life, his health, his destitute financial situation, and all of this.
He had a lot of feelings, and each one of those feelings are contemporary to our time. I mean, it's not necessarily, the flour mill breaking down is not contemporary to my time at all. I can just go order some, Pillsbury, but it's the same type of feeling that we have that are contemporary. And I think people really wanted to feel that and wanted to be a part of that and be heard without being so obvious about it. Until a few years later, then people just wanted obviousness and in your face and just a little bit more direct writing. I mean, it wasn't the nightingale that was causing you pain. It was that person. Like, that person did the worst thing to you possible.
Right.
So, I think I think poets and composers gradually felt more comfortable communicating honesty and transparency. It wasn't just pretty stuff on the page, and it wasn't just pretty stuff on the wall. They're being heard.
And this also, in this period, it leads to these unprecedented relationships between poets and composers, where we have, even going back to Schubert, he wrote, I think, 630 songs or so in his very short life. And you have everything from him collaborating very closely with poets and, them sort of writing for each other, to people like Goethe having to send Schubert a letter saying, like, please don't send any more of my poems. Like, I hate this. Please stop. So it's kind of an unprecedented relationship between these two types of artists that continues.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think Meyerhofer is, whenever Schubert sets Meyerhofer, his some scholars say roommate, other scholars say other things, but you can tell that those 49, I think there's 49 songs. Those 49 songs range from really great to really bad. Like, as far as, like, some people really enjoy listening to them, some people really don't like them. But that's what a relationship is. There's really good things that come out of bad stuff, and then there's really bad things that come out of good stuff sometimes. I mean, it's the ebb and flow of creativity and relationships. So it's pretty thrilling to see that all chronicled for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this poetic movement of Romanticism spreads from Germany to the rest of Europe, and sort of along with it, the genre, or this flowering of art song, because, as we've said, it always existed in a certain way, but this sort of renewed interest in art song spreads throughout Europe, and you get these sort of different national styles, as you do in all kinds of music. Could you talk a little bit about that? Where does it go? What does it result in?
Yeah, well, it's hard to talk about what is going on in Britain, because nothing really happens in Britain, it seems, between Purcell and Britain. But there is stuff. There is plenty of stuff that's happening. But I think, it becomes a nationalistic thing almost.
Yeah.
And I to this day, I realize how easily they could cross borders and how cosmopolitan these people are. And it's hard for me to imagine that, us being on this country that is across many oceans. But I really think they began to meld styles, but then for some reason, and maybe it was leading up to the war, there was some sort of identity that they needed to establish. The way the French wrote and the way the French picked the words that they wanted to use were so completely different than the Germans. And I don't know if that's why we only study French and German, it seems, art song. I don't know if they just put the two furthest away from each other. There were songs in Sweden, there were songs even in America at that time, like the Americas. But for some reason, yeah, we study that French and German dichotomy so intently. I still don't know why, but
I would say that for a lot of these countries, the 19th century is all about the development of a national identity.
Yeah.
And culture plays a huge part in that of as these people, especially countries like modern day Germany and Italy, which were not unified at this time, one of the things that sort of brings them together is this formation of an idea of Germanness or of Italianness, and therefore the art and the culture that you're producing is a part of that identity that you're trying to create together. And I think you see that because we also have Italian art song, which is mostly written by opera composers, Bellini, Verdi, people like this, and it sounds like opera arias. And we have at the same time the French who are always looking for this sort of clarity and finesse of language, and you have that compositional movement that sort of follows that and prizes clarity, simplicity, form, and the Germans who are trying to get into as deep into the psyche as possible and just as raw and emotional as possible, and then the British who love pastoral stuff.
And I think maybe the French, maybe we study them differently. The French, Debussy, was so enthralled by the gamelan sounds at the World Fair, and I just wonder, I've always maybe felt a little freer to do different verse forms. Like the poetry was much different. Even structured, they had the Alexandrine settings that Fauré would do so well with a certain amount of syllables. So it's not like they didn't have structure, but it's one of those things where if you have more structure, you can begin to see and become more flexible at times. And I think the French actually did it. I think Germans, Germans were like, well, we're gonna go deep, we're gonna deep dive, and everything will just fall into place. But I think the French set up a structure so they could break it, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And it sort of brings me to another point, that these pieces, because of their size and scope, they're small, and they become compositional exercises for these composers. As you kind of alluded to this earlier when you were saying that some of these are sketches for larger things, but these things that have a limited scope and scale offer a lot of these composers an outlet to develop their own personal compositional style in a way, in a small format that can be really succinct and really clear.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. And along with that, even their personalities, between even within the same country, Germany, Brahms never wrote an opera.
Yeah.
So, and I think you're absolutely right about using song as sketches or using song as a way to kind of figure out who they are as well. I mean, Brahms wrote so many songs and not a single opera, and I think that shows us a lot about some of the personalities of other composers too.
Yeah.
It took a lot, I'm sure, to get Debussy to write Peleas. I mean, that was probably a lot of art songs under his belt before. I don't know that.
It's the Chanson de Bilitis.
Oh, perfect.
A 3-song cycle, beautiful song cycle on very racy poetry.
Yep.
that had to be published. They had to pretend that they had discovered it from ancient Greece. Because it was too racy, but there's a lot of sketches in there for the role of Melisande.
I have no idea, but that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, and these connections don't just go, as you said, like Brahms never composed an opera, but these sort of musical ideas that composers are playing with can go from instrumental to vocal, from vocal to instrumental. I would point out one song that we're going to be performing next Saturday, Korngold's Sterbelied. One of the reasons we selected it was because the theme of the song appears in his piano quintet, which we performed this summer. So that was one of really the germs of this recital, was noticing that and sort of building around that familiar thing that we had just performed.
Sure. Well, I mean, like, it kind of makes sense. I mean, composers were really aware of the traditions of what came before them. So just like when you and I perform early music with an early orchestra with period musicians, they want to know every single word we're singing because they want to make it as vocal as possible. So it's, I mean, these composers were really, really aware of that and making sure that, singers weren't just on an island by themselves. We do matter.
Yeah.
The text matters.
As we're talking about the 19th century, especially, one of the really important things that happens over the course of that century is the move of this repertoire from the home or from the salon to then the concert hall, because this was originally not a repertoire of music that would be performed publicly. You went to go see the symphony, the opera, and song was just for the home and for intimate gatherings. Can you talk a little bit about how that evolution takes place?
Yeah, I honestly don't really know how it went from, I mean, I don't know how it went from the home to the concert hall. One would think, I assume that it's because it's like, it is economical. It's just kind of like now. I mean, we're going to be entering back into not having audiences for a while. And I know it's easier to get 2 people together and sing and make music rather than a whole orchestra. Perhaps it was something like that. If you know what it was, I mean, I honestly don't know. Maybe was it the identity of famous singers? That's my.
That is, yeah, I think that is a part of it. And I think mostly we have one person to thank for that, and that is Robert Schumann. He is the person who first starts to elevate, especially his song cycles. Schumann, we could do an entire hour on Schumann, of course, but he sort of has this unique role in musical life in the 19th century as not only a composer, but sort of the music critic at the time. And he's really interested in writing about music and in getting to be sort of the arbiter of what is good musically.
I do remember Clara Schumann was like the first one to perform piano sonatas from memory. I do remember. So that makes sense. That's a household.
And it's kind of in a way his elevation of both chamber music and art song, these genres that had been home oriented, he starts to say, no, this is great music. This is very high art. This is not just for you and your cousin to play around with at home.
Yeah.
And he starts bringing these things to concert halls, and thinking particularly of the premiere of Frauenliebe und Leben, A Woman's Life and Love, which it's the first real song cycle that is from a female perspective. The poet is male, but is writing poetry as if from a female perspective. And I don't remember what he paired it with on the other half of the program, but he does orchestrate this huge premiere in a concert hall with a male singer singing it, of course. But yeah, it's very interesting to think how we have this progression of the art song and the song cycle coming from the home to the concert hall. And then I would say even before the limitations that we're under now, we had started to see a transition back to the home in a way that we probably didn't see in, let's say, the mid 20th century. You started to see in the 90s to today, the revival of things like house concerts and salons and this prizing of intimate settings for this repertoire. So I think it's a very interesting cycle that we've gone on.
Yeah, and I wonder if it isn't part of an audience's desire to be placed into somewhere where they're not, like suspending belief when you're sitting in a concert hall listening about, the hills and the forests and things like that. I think that's maybe the audience really enjoyed thinking about that stuff, even though they were in a urban setting or metropolitan area, and they had all sorts of things that they had to do every single day, but they wanted to escape it for a while, like Goethe or things like that, perhaps. I guess that's a interesting way to think about that. Oh, Schumann.
Oh, Schumann. And we sort of touched on song cycles there, and maybe that's another term that we should define. Right. Talk to me a little bit about what a song cycle is, what sort of the broad history of those is.
The first technically was Beethoven's Die ferne Geliebte, which to be very honest, I'm not a big fan of, but I know, and people have that expression all the time, and someday I'm sure I will love it. Right now I don't, but it's just the idea of there's one overall thought or one overall story. And I song cycles have really evolved over time. It could be the same poet. It could be it could be the same person that you're chronicling. But it's just a matter of making things cohesive in a nice little package. Like people really like things in. They don't like jumbling things.
Absolutely.
I don't know. Go ahead.
It's a way, I think, of expanding this genre, which is small pieces, into a more extended chunk. It's a way of linking these together, almost the way that we would program a song recital today, is you take these little pieces and string them into a necklace.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like it's a composer doing that for you, saying,
I prefer cycles. I know a lot of people, like 10 years ago, were trying to do art song and stage it and make a storyline that way. And for my personal goal of performing, that's the stuff I want to keep out. I want to create cycles that between songs that maybe don't make sense, or I want to keep out the extra stuff. So we're really just paying attention to the words. And that's just me personally. I am totally all about going to see one of those. And even Source Song Festival had some that we staged of Dominic Argento's, and it's super successful. As far as performing goes, I choose to really focus on the cycle. And if not a bunch of cycles, it's just having those cycles also connect. It's easier for me to perform that way, so then I'm not jumping into 8 million characters.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so that brings us to the present. Let's talk a little bit about the creation of new song and what's going on right now in the world of art song. Where is this art form headed, and how is it getting there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to the text clearly changing, people reading poems differently, people actually reading poems, and poems actually being published. They're being consumed as poetry. I think some of these composers then took license and decided to do prose, which is super exciting. One of the best prose art song composers ever to live was Dominic Argento, a Minnesotan by heart, and we miss him dearly. But I think, he taught also at a university, and I think it was at these universities in, the 1900s that people realized that everything could be changed. Everything was uncertain for a while in the 40s, 30s, 40s. Everything was really uncertain like it is now. And people just experimented with whatever would reach an audience. And feelings or affect aside, like it was just one of those abstract things that it just became whatever you want it to be. I think whatever audiences were willing to sit through. And that's and whatever kind of reaction, just like Stravinsky, like whatever reaction there was going to be, it was going to be something.
Yeah. So, and I think that's a common thread. This art form in particular is by definition linked to poetic movements. So it's going to be following the poetic movements of the time by a hair. Yeah. And it's going to be trying to, it has those same goals of capturing both the structure, the content, and the emotional meaning of this new kind of poetry. So as we think of the advancements in literature or the changing styles of literature over the 20th century, from modernism to postmodernism, we're going to have composers who are trying to heighten those new aspects of poetry through music. Yeah. And so then again, we're back where we started with poetic movements. We're back where we started with the relationship between the text and the music and how that can be played with and explored.
And broken. And completely broken, like the song, I don't know when it was written. It had to be like the 60s or 70s, but Barrio's Sequenza for voice, where it's all just like and nonsense sounds, but that's I see it all the time on Wigmore's stage. So it's an art song, and it's unaccompanied and glorious in its own way, and it broke. There's no poem involved. It's all.
There is.
Is there a poem?
Give me a few words to build a house for a woman. It's a postmodern poem that perfect. I think it's 3 lines, probably 4 words in each line that don't have a linear structure or clear meaning, but he manages to extend these over an 8-minute piece in this really remarkable way. It's
incredible. It's incredible. And I, like he uses a poem then, and then maybe I'm trying to think of somebody that doesn't use, like the new Craigslist leader. Like people are finding modern ways to attach music to things that our eyes have already read, have already digested.
Yeah, so. And this, again, found texts is a huge movement in the 20th century of taking words from unusual contexts, excerpting them, and saying that they're a poem. Talk a little bit about the Craigslist leader. What are they? What are they about?
Oh, they're like, it's just like, those missed connections in newspaper or personal. I think I don't know what composer did this, but I know they set personal ads also. So it's very similar. It's almost like, composers always have that problem of, has this already been done and am I doing it again? But the Craigslist leader are just those things where, oh, I saw this person on a train and I'm going to write about this person. And that a composer set that to music. It's just like a personal ad. And I think, composers are finding different ways to set good text. And I think they're just following tradition. I know a lot of people like to think that they're being, like even Dominic, like setting prose or writing his own or doing a translated text of Italian. I think everyone's just following a tradition and they want to buck this tradition and they want to say, oh, I'm doing something new, but I don't know if we have to. I don't, you know, there's creative ways to do everything. Craigslist Leader is one of them. I'm trying to think of other songs that are just so out there, that use non-traditional instruments or non-traditional text.
Well,
I know I recently did something by Catherine Dalton called Sienna, and what she's doing now is, and some composers are doing is they're writing a melody for the singer and then a obbligato instrument, and instead of using a piano or a flute or something, I actually had a friend who was a multi-instrumentalist for Palestine, and he played the oud to it, and we had some non-Western elements into the song. So as much as text kind of binds us to what language we're singing in at times, I think one thing that art song composers are trying to do is make this music more accessible, no matter what culture we find ourselves in, but just make it accessible to every reach of the globe. We are beholden to text, so that's why translations are so important in art song. Like, do we sing them in the original language or do we not? It's one thing that we can focus on. But I think the thing that composers are doing best now is making songs and music more accessible, in whatever way.
Yeah. Well, I see we have a question or two in the box already, but I would encourage you in the next few minutes to get some questions in that we'll answer. And in the meantime, I was going to ask you, Clara, because I know this probably changes every few months, but what are the art songs or the art song composers that you're feeling really connected to right now, and why? What's in your heavy rotation, or what are you practicing?
Well, I do have to program a recital coming up for, I think, next December. So, but there's one that a lot of people don't know about, and I was introduced to him by Erica Switzer. He's Canadian, and so I'm trying to go through some of this Robert Fleming music that he wrote this cycle about, on the text of Owen Dodson. He wrote this cycle about the perspective of Mary. And it starts as a lullaby, as Jesus.
Like Jesus, Mary, yeah?
Yes. It's okay. Virgin Mary, yeah. It starts, she's singing a lullaby because Jesus was born. It's a 9-song set, and the last one is the same lullaby as Jesus is crucified. And it's a really interesting cycle because it's so simple. It's very simple. The piano is very simple. The text is it's very direct, but it's really, really gorgeous. And not a lot of people know it, but every time I do it, it's super effective for people who practice any religion or anything. They're really affected by it because the lullaby is something so universal. So along with Robert Fleming's music, I'm also looking at many, many different lullabies because my goal is to take Brahms and Schubert and all those really famous ones and make them into a recording for some of my friends that have kids, because like everybody needs access to a good sounding lullaby.
Yes, that is true.
There's the Britain has the charm of lullabies. Maybe they're not so suitable as lullabies. They're a little edgy, a couple of them. Yeah. And I'm trying to find those that are not entirely well known, but are still part of the classical art song canon.
I love that you say that too, because that brings us back to art song as a utilitarian genre. Yes. This is useful music. These lullabies you can actually use to put a baby to sleep. You don't have to hire a symphony orchestra and go to a concert hall. Yeah. This intimacy and the usefulness of it as music is really what keeps it alive, I think. And
I like even in a Brene Brown book, she just said that song is really one of the most connecting things that we have. And I couldn't believe I was reading that in like a self-help book and not in a song anthology book. Yeah. But like that's exactly, it just gives us some sort of connection to people, and it's easy to do, and it's the hardest thing I think is to allow this audience to peer into something that not a lot of people share. And it's not it's not a showing thing. It's I'm gonna let you observe. So that's one of the hardest things I think for for people to cross that bridge. But as soon as people can feel that connection, it's really valuable, I think.
Yeah. Well, great. Let's move on to a couple of questions. Allison and David ask, what are full names of the 20th century artists we mentioned?
So
I'm sure we can go through a few of those.
Yeah. Luciano Berio is one of them.
Benjamin Britten.
Yep.
A big art song composer. We mentioned Dominic Argento.
Yep.
Look at us covering 3 different countries already. Yeah.
Yeah. Dominic is spelled with a K.
Oh.
Yeah. All right. It's all right.
I'm trying to think. Are there any others that we specifically mentioned? You this set with the lullabies, the Marian lullabies. I would love to look that up.
And Robert Fleming is also Robert Fleming is the Canadian composer.
Okay.
It's really fascinating stuff. He wrote it for Maureen Forrester, so the great Canadian mezzo.
Excellent. Well, those are a few to get you started on your searches through the art song history. And Charlotte asks, Clara, you mentioned composers writing a melody for the singer and an obbligato for the instrumentalist. Is text also involved?
Yeah, text is also a part of it. And what I love about this is that, as a singer, we're not really trained to do a ton of improvisation, and it's not something that I'm good at. So if I am given a melody by a composer with text, then I can bend a little bit in some of the stylistic things that I choose. And the reason I talk about this is because I did a whole album of art song that was like this, where I worked with a jazz pianist. And so Jeremy Walker is a pianist, and what he did, our process was that he wrote out, it was a new way to do art song. He wrote out my line, and I had text that he had chosen, but all I knew that I was going to get from him were certain chords. And the way he approached those chords, I had to improvise the style. So if he gave me a staccato passage, then that was something that I could mimic in my voice. But sometimes it was raining out, so we made things a little more relaxed, or it was sunny out, so we brought them upbeat a little bit. So I think that's a new way that composers are doing some song. They're leaving room to grow even with each performance. It's more like a jazz idiom where improvisation is a lot, but I think it's not only for jazz. I think it's something that art song is attempting, just like Catherine Dalton's piece that I did.
Right, and that gets us back into the thorniness of nailing down a definition of art song, because it makes me think of something like the Rachmaninoff vocalese, which is all on just ooh.
Yep.
Is that an art song, or is it a vocalese, which is different than an art song?
Yeah.
I mean, these are impossible questions, but they're certainly on sort of the border of this art form and of this genre.
Yeah, it's amazing. The difference between, I really think even in pop culture, the difference between art and entertainment is really something that is blurred a lot now, which is great. And I think it started that way in the 50s, with the invention of the electric guitar. But now, I mean, everything is kind of just however you feel about it. I think, Brittany Howard from Alabama Shakes is an art song singer, because it is something that is so, everything is so inward based. It's not a show, even though she can put on a great fireworks show too. Lizzo has her moments. Lizzo has her moments where it's an outward show of entertainment, but then there's a lot of inward viewing that we see through her too. So it's great. I love these artists, and I encourage classical artists that are to do a lot more of that too. A little bit of both. Why not?
And I would encourage you again to type in your questions. We have a few more minutes left with Clara, so get those in there. But that's a nice sort of summation, is that art song is something that straddles this line between entertainment and sort of high culture. It's something that's hopefully is both, right? You hope that it is both entertaining and edifying, enlightening, mind expanding, and things like that.
Yeah, it's something that, you know, we really have to do together, you know, like it's hard to take this art form, you know, out of the home where we had such immediacy, like
Mhm.
we could see people's reaction right away, and it's really hard to do that, you know, and even on recordings, it's really a difficult thing. So I
Yeah.
commend you. I'm excited to watch on Saturday. I can't wait.
Oh, thanks. Well, yeah, and I guess speaking as a performance, as a performer, I would imagine you feel the same way. But performing art song, performing this repertoire is some of the most closely connected you can ever feel to an audience, because
Absolutely.
it is so bare. It's just you and your collaborative partner on stage
Yeah.
and the audience right there. And I think almost uniquely, you get this feeling of give and take with the audience. You get to really feel like you are speaking to them, and that their reactions are coming back to you in real time in a really rewarding way.
Yeah, it's really true. I think the among aside from all the awards and things like that, my whenever an audience member comes up to me and says, "I really felt like you were singing right to me," that it's like I try.
Yeah,
I really try, and
yeah.
I try and really connect with everyone. And not every song is going to do it. Not every song is going to be interesting for me to sing. But I always know there's a purpose behind it, and to never assume that an audience, you know, wants one thing or the other. It's just it's all here for anyone to digest whenever they want. So that's
Mhm.
it's one of the best things about being with other people, and you know, connecting with people that way.
Well, I think that is a great note to end on.
Awesome.
So, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Clara, for
sure.
being here.